These are very different people. Biden has been and remains unsophisticated about the way business works, unsophisticated about the stock market by nature, picks people who have been historically bad for Wall Street, Lena Khan, Jonathan Tanner, antitrust. This whole idea that she's a clone of his is completely wrong. So she was much more moderate than he was.
So you think it's a net positive for the markets?
Absolutely.
And for American business?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it.
Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee, a positive for the markets. These are some of the distinctions that are being drawn between Kamala Harris and former Democratic nominee Joe Biden by the pro-business, pro-corporate community. And it is worth delving into this because, look, Kamala Harris is kind of an enigma when it comes to what her genuine principles are. You know, she just kind of goes with the flow and whatever tends to be trendy at any given moment. But she has taken some steps that make it clear to me that she's gonna be far friendlier to corporate America than Joe Biden has been. And so I wanna break that down. Now, Jim Cramer is the person you just heard from over at CNBC, and he's giving us a sense of how Harris is considered more corporate than Biden in a number of important ways. Before we get to that though, before I show you those clips, I'm just curious what you think, Cenk. You know, on surface level, do you think Kamala Harris is gonna play patty cakes with corporate executives?
Of course. So look, I want to dissuade you of two things that I keep seeing in the press that have no validity at all. One is they keep calling her a progressive, and I'm like, based on what?
She ran to the, like when she was running in the Democratic primary in 2020, to be fair, she did position herself as further to the left compared to Biden, right?
But only compared to Biden, and Biden was almost the most right-wing candidate in the race.
I agree, so I'll give you a specific example. Biden ran on, I will raise corporate taxes to 28%. Remember, Trump lowered them to 21%. Kamala Harris says, I will raise corporate taxes to 35%, which was the original tax rate prior to the Trump tax cuts for corporations.
I mean, just to be clear, neither one of them intended to raise it $1.
Agreed, I agree 100% on that.
It was just theatrics. And at the time, progressives were a little bit more ascendant in 2020, so she was trying to lean towards that part of the party. But no, historically, donors and her have a terrific relationship, and I've never seen her do anything progressive. And so she doesn't fight for it. Look, I'm happy to have a turn in direction. And if she starts doing progressive things or advocating for progressive things, I'm super happy to do it. But there is no evidence of that. And then they keep saying, oh, younger voters like her. No, they don't. That's not based on any poll at all. And I'm like, what is this like? Why do people keep saying things that are just demonstrably, empirically wrong? And then thank you to Harry Enton at CNN who broke the gaslighting. He did a segment and he's like, that's not true at all.
That's, yeah, exactly. He did break down the smaller percentage of the youth vote that support Harris in this race so far. I mean, things can change, obviously. But with that in mind, why don't we get to some of these clips? Here's what Jim Cramer has to say about Harris and how she differs from Biden in regard to regulating the tech sector.
You've got a person who's from California. I'm regarding this actually as mega versus MAGA. Mega tech does better with someone who's sophisticated, who understands California, who is not against tech. Her brother-in-law is Tony West, who is a former general counsel of PepsiCo, then was with the Justice Department, is now the general counsel of Uber. And you tell me if there's someone who's more sophisticated and knows more about business and the West Coast than her brother-in-law, who would be an amazing advisor. They're close.
Hey, don't scroll away. Come back. Because before the video continues, we just want to urge you to lend your support to TYT. You power our honest reporting. You do it at tyt.com/team, and we love you for it.
So Cramer isn't wrong about that. In fact, there's an excellent piece in the New York Times out today that kind of goes over what Kamala Harris has been doing behind the scenes in terms of, luring in corporate America, attempting to appeal to them. They write that she's been meeting with groups of corporate executives roughly every 2 months at her residence in Washington, and that's according to 2 executives who have met with her. She very clearly wants to kind of pivot away from some of the regulatory efforts that Biden was pushing for, and In particular, it seems like she's ready to kind of purge the executive branch of some of Biden's more popular and basically Lina Khan, who heads the Federal Trade Commission, who's been fighting against mergers and monopolies. It seems like she's more willing to kind of do away with Lina Khan, which is concerning.
Yeah, but so now nuance. Okay, so there's different industries that are affected by the different candidates, and it's kind of sick because it depends on who they raise more money from. And so since Kamala Harris is from California and she has better connections to the tech companies, she raises more money from the tech companies, so she might be less interested in antitrust against tech companies. Although that one's also complicated because there's tons of tech companies that want Google and Meta broken up so that they can compete better against them. And a lot of those guys are actually supporting JD Vance.
That's true.
And that's why he has the, I like Lina Khan, an antitrust stance that was surprising to so many people, right?
She's also not going to pursue changes to basically the protections to these platforms like Facebook, for instance, Meta, for instance, or X. Section 230 is something that Republicans and some Democrats have been targeting, which would essentially penalize the tech companies or the platforms that have certain content published on their platforms, right?
Yeah, it would destroy the internet. It's the dumbest thing in the world. And I get why Trump's a dumbass and I don't like Meta, let's get rid of 230. It would also destroy Truth Social, you dumb person, okay? But Democrats who go along with that drive me nuts. So anyways, but Kamala Harris might be tougher on other industries like banking, most importantly, although I doubt that, but oil and gas, she would be a little tougher on oil and gas. And so the fact that it's like donor tributes like in the Hunger Games that determine all the policy, you're not gonna hear that anywhere else. But they do hint at it. Like Politico had a really interesting piece that explained which lobbyists are happy and unhappy with Kamala Harris. They never ever mentioned that it was corruption. They just like with a straight face, they're like, well, since she takes money from here and doesn't take money from there, lobbyists here are concerned and the other ones are not. This is like the most brazen corruption. And if you're a Republican, you're like, oh my God, you see what we told you about the Democrats. Brother, the Republicans do the same exact thing, and even a little bit more. Historically, although these days the Democrats take more money. So we're gonna have to see how it shakes out. But is she going to be a revolutionary that shakes the system and goes, you know what, I'm not gonna listen to the lobbyists, and I'm here for the people? No, there's a 0% chance of that.
Okay,
right?
so with that in mind, let's talk a little bit more about the tech sector and Biden's appointments that Jim Cramer very clearly is not in favor of, corporate America not in favor of, and Kamala Harris might do away with. Let's watch.
Biden's attorney general, their attorney general was antagonistic to the point of like making fun of Apple, saying, look, their phone is so good, we gotta stop that. I don't have to go into Lina Khan anymore. I don't, because everyone knows my views, so there's no need to reiterate.
Yes.
But I will say Jonathan Cantor in the end, attorney general, he goes, Khan goes, these people go.
Super excited about these people going, right? And look, what's amazing to me, Cenk, is people like Jim Cramer are only concerned with how the stock market's performing. The stock market's been performing really well.
Yeah, he actually even mentioned that. Even though he was like taking pot shots at Biden for the only good things that he's done, like putting Lina Khan and Cantor into place, etc. But even in the middle of that, he had to acknowledge, well, the market has done great under Biden. Okay, then what are you bitching about?
What's the issue?
Because you know why? Of course I know why. The reason is they want maximum greed.
They do.
They're like, oh, the market's at 110% of what we expected. I want it at 120. I want it at 200%. Give everything to corporations. And that, honestly, that's the whole point of CNBC, is to represent corporate interests.
So this next clip is what I'm personally the most worried about when it comes to Kamala Harris. And honestly, the way that the Republican Party has been marketing themselves and positioning themselves, okay? And it has to do with this political realignment. At least that's what it appears to be on a surface level. I'm not sure I'm buying the rhetoric on the right, but in terms of optics, this does not look good for Democrats and Harris in particular. So take a look.
This is going to be globalist, versus nativist, not nationalist, nativist.
Yes.
Populist in terms of the Republican Party versus pro-business versus the Democrat international business. You're not going to get someone who is as negative about tech as the people, except for Vance, who's incredibly negative about tech.
Right.
I mean, Vance wants to, he wants to, I don't know what he wants to do other than the fact that he favors the worker, and she favors lower prices.
Yeah.
That's what globalism is. It's lower prices for people. With the Trump-Vance ticket, there can be no doubt. The old free market Republicans have been obliterated. In their place is an American first withdrawal from the rest of the world, where all the money in the industry is left here. Tariffs go up, and the government makes it much harder for businesses to move their operations overseas. The days when other countries threw up tariffs and all sorts of other trade barriers to American goods, then we open our factories there, government does nothing to retaliate, they're done. They're done with Trump.
That is not good. Like, look, everyone has their own priorities, okay? So this is my bias, and it's important for people to know what my bias is. My bias is in favor of the American worker, period. So the protectionism that kind of started under Trump and continued under Biden, I'm actually in favor of. I want more manufacturing in America. I want us to build things, to create things, to export things, and not rely so heavily on importing products that were basically created and made and manufactured by cheap labor that was exploited abroad. And so the idea that this is now being framed as Kamala Harris is pro, I guess, consumer, because it would like lead to cheap prices to exploit cheap labor abroad, while Vance is pro-worker, that is not good. That is not a good look for Democrats, if you ask me.
Yeah, I have a lot of mixed feelings about that because I don't think that Jim Cramer is correct, and that's not a controversial opinion. He's almost never correct. But when he frames it as Vance is the populist, and he said Vance is for the workers, the average worker, and Kamala Harris is the globalist.
Disaster.
Yeah, that's not helpful at all. Right?
I mean, it's not helpful to Kamala Harris, but the question is it true? And the New York Times piece that I was referring to earlier specifically laid out how Kamala Harris is meeting with corporate executives to talk to them about opening up manufacturing possibilities in other countries.
Yeah, look, I'm less protectionist than you are, but I am for the average worker. I want to get there in a slightly different way, and I think that the tariffs, et cetera, do drive up prices, and I don't think that's a great idea. But there are different ways to protect the average worker. Don't let the corporations write the trade deals. It drives me crazy that they just hand it off and then go, oh yeah, write it in your own interest instead of the worker's interest and the average American's interest. Now, okay, having said all that, when he frames it that way, it's both very bad news for Kamala Harris. He thinks he's doing her a favor, but he's painting her as the pro-establishment candidate that Americans don't want at all.
The pro-corporate stooge. That's the way that he is.
And he's bragging about it, like, oh, she's a pro-corporate stooge.
Because that's what he wants. That's what he wants. Remember, Jim Cramer's #1 priority is profitability, increased profitability for these corporations, which usually translates to what, Cenk? Corporate stock buybacks, which artificially inflates the value of shares that he might be invested in himself. That's all he cares about.
Yeah, so look, they would love Trump on CNBC if it wasn't for two things, because he gives away trillions of dollars to corporations. So the Kramers of the world probably pleasure themselves to the bills that Trump has passed. But it's the protectionist stuff that drives them crazy. But more importantly, he's so unstable. They're like, I don't know, this lunatic can do anything, and then that'll disturb their beloved markets, right? And in a bad way, for all of us, right? But when he's bragging about what a pro-corporate globalist Kamala Harris is, there is one silver lining, and it's kind of important. So for the rest of the country, that's a terrible message to send out about Kamala Harris. But for the CNBC viewer, it might not be so bad, because I realized literally in the middle of watching that clip, I'm like, oh, these are the Nikki Haley voters. The people who watch CNBC, I'm gonna call them the CNBC Republicans from now on. They're the ones who are not for Trump, because they're like, I don't want the stock market to go down. I don't want protectionist measures. I don't want business limited in any way. And so Trump gives us all the tax cuts and deregulation, but he does limit us on these tariffs, et cetera, and he's such a wild man. So those CNBC Republicans might flip to Kamala Harris.
No, that is happening. That's already happening. A story we'll do later on the show today. the Nikki Haley supporters have now formed a group, Haley Voters for Harris. And look, in my opinion, part of this political realignment that's happening is a result of Donald Trump entering the political space, leading to Republican voters feeling repulsed by him and essentially joining this already giant tent of Democrats. Okay, we're talking about Bush-era Republicans now joining the Democratic Party. And I don't want their influence in the Democratic Party. I can't stand those people. I'm gonna say it with my full chest. I can't stand those people. The neocons, okay, the globalists, no, never liked them. And they were coming up at a time when I became politicized. I've always found those people repulsive. Now they're part of the Democratic Party and they have a lot of weight in the Democratic Party. That is a problem.
No, what you're seeing is the shift that the Republicans keep pointing out, that the Democrats are now becoming the party of big money, corporations, the establishment.
The elite.
Right, and the Republicans are pretending to be populist. But the transition hasn't actually happened in policy. So the Republicans are still giving corporations way more than the Democrats are. The biggest tax cut in US history, the giant deregulation, go drill everywhere. We don't care about any laws or rules, let corporations run wild. So, but the bottom line and the most important thing to keep in mind, if you're just a voter trying to figure out who to go for here, guys, you got to decide it on other grounds. Because the bottom line is both Democrats and Republicans these days are run by corporate donors. And so both sides will do 98% of what corporate donors want. So it's kind of a tie. I mean, and if you're a Democrat, I know that breaks your heart. And you think, no, our side is angels. No.
Not even angels. The Democratic Party that looked out for blue collar workers, for ordinary Americans, ensuring that they've got money in their pockets and they're not being exploited by their employers, ensuring that their jobs are protected. That party, in my opinion, no longer exists. There are some politicians within that party who still believe those things, but their influence has been fading increasingly every election cycle. A few other things that I want to just get the audience to know about. So this Politico piece was also fantastic. It kind of broke down what members of the corporate community are saying about Kamala Harris. So let's go to the first graphic where they write that corporate Democrats and financiers on Wall Street are optimistic that Kamala Harris would govern as a centrist, said Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, a professor of management at the Yale School of Management who regularly consults with top US CEOs. Quote, the business community, especially the tech/VC community, are exhilarated over this choice, he told Politico. Now, in contrast to Trump, she's not an isolationist on foreign policy, something many in the corporate world care deeply about, and they believe that she is less likely to pursue trade policies that are as protectionist as Donald Trump's proposals. And so that's, in my opinion, concerning, right? That's the neocon influence within the Democratic Party, if you ask me. And finally, in an email to Politico, here's what Mark Cuban, a billionaire investor, had to say about Kamala Harris. The feedback I'm getting, but certainly not confirmed by the VP, is that she will be far more open to business, artificial intelligence, crypto, and government as a service. Changing the policies changes the message and lets everyone know that Kamala Harris is in charge and open literally for business.
Not a great statement either. All right, super last thing for me is, if I was gonna vote just on this issue, I'd still vote for the Democrats. And it's not because of bias, it's because of this stone cold reality. Trump took the corporate tax rates from 35% to 21%, and then also cut many other taxes that help billionaires, including the repatriation tax, which allowed, for example, his top donor Sheldon Adelson to bring back billions of dollars and pay only 8.5% instead of 35%. So they saved billions of dollars, corporate interested, because of Donald Trump. And Biden, yes, he was pressured by international forces, et cetera, but he did it, and I don't think Trump would have. Passed a 15% minimum tax on all corporations. So that's a world of difference. And if you're a Democrat and you're naive and you think, oh no, Democrats are, challenge corporate power. No, generally speaking, they don't challenge corporate power at all. But on that tax issue alone, that is worth billions to trillions of dollars, that's enormous. And score one for the Democrats on that. I know it's a low bar, but they cleared it and Trump and the Republicans didn't. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.